You're listening to the Piano Parent Podcast with Shelley Davis, episode 356. Hey there, and welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. I'm Shelley Davis, a longtime piano teacher and parent with my husband of 4 mostly musical kids. As parents, we spend so much time trying to encourage and motivate our kids. We wonder if we're doing the best things for them. We second guess our decisions, and we worry if we're going to scar them for life. While you focus on encouraging your kids, I'm here to reassure and inspire you. I'll be here every week with practice tips, inspirational teacher interviews, and musical topics to help you impress your kids with your musical knowledge. Parenting is not for the faint of heart, but it's much easier with support, and you have come to the right place. Good morning, piano parents. Thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. In just a few days, it's going to be February 2nd. And in my part of the world, February 2nd is one of the few, maybe the only holiday that is centered around the weather. Groundhog Day is celebrated on February 2nd, and I was kind of digging around on YouTube to find out a little bit about the history, and it apparently came from people from Germany, had their own culture having to do with farmers and needing to know kind of what the weather forecast was, and the idea was that these hibernating animals that lived in burrows would instinctively start to come out and stop hibernating and start to be a little bit more active. And that was a sign that spring was going to be soon and warmer weather was on its way, and it would be a good time to start planting crops. If you're not familiar with Groundhog Day, here in America, up in Pennsylvania, it's a weird name. How do you say? Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. They actually have an event, and they have a groundhog that they pull out, and if it's a sunny day and the groundhog sees its shadow, then it's going to want to go back into its burrow, and that is a symbol, or it signifies that there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. If it's a rainy, cloudy, overcast day, then the groundhog won't see its shadow. It won't go back down into its burrow, and that's a sign that warmer weather is on its way. It's kind of funny that February 2nd is pretty much in the middle between December 20th, 21st, the first day of winter, and the first day of spring around mid-March. So no matter how you slice it, it's going to be the end of spring soon anyway, but I think it's kind of a fun little tradition. It became even more fun about 30 years ago whenever the movie Groundhog Day was released. It's a PG-rated. I would consider it fairly family-friendly. There are some grown-up topics that you might want to be careful with, especially younger children. But Groundhog Day was written, directed by Harold Ramis. It stars Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell and some other well-known actors from the late 80s, early 90s. And the idea is that Bill Murray plays a character named Phil Connors, and he is a weatherman, and he is basically just kind of going through the motions with his life. He's not really interested in anything. He views himself to be a little more important than he actually is. And a lot of the stories that his boss asks him to do, Phil believes are beneath him. And one of those assignments is to go to Pennsylvania to do a story on Groundhog Day. And somehow Phil Connors finds himself in a perpetual loop where he is reliving the same day over and over again. Some theories say that throughout the movie and all of the things that Phil Connors did and learned and finally transformed his whole personality, his whole character, the theory is that movie, he relived that same day for 30 to 40 years. And I can't imagine living that many days, that day over and over again. But you may feel like some of your days are just sort of mundane and one is just running into the next. And thinking about Groundhog Day made me think about our piano kids and how sometimes I wonder if they may feel like they're just having the same piano lesson over and over again. If you're a piano teacher listening, do you ever feel like you're giving the same lesson over and over again? In my early days of teaching, I would do the same things that my teacher did, and whenever I gave an assignment out of the lesson book, I would put the date on it. I would just write in the date somewhere on the page just to sort of track where, when we started this music and kind of follow along and see how long it took to pass this piece of music. And if a student came back after 1 week of expected practice, but they couldn't play through the piece, then I would mark through the original date and write a second date. Okay, you didn't have this done by today, so I would like for you to have it done by next week. The next week, if they came in and still hadn't done it, then I would mark through that date and write a new date. And before you know it, we could have a whole track of a month, maybe even 6 weeks, where we've been assigning the same piece, and maybe they would practice it during their lesson, but then they wouldn't make any progress with it at home. And so when they came back to their lesson, we're still doing the same old thing. Fortunately, over the years, I have changed tactics, and I don't assign learning pieces over and over for weeks on end. There may be larger pieces that our students are working on, and we'll take some time to learn the notes and rhythms, and then we'll take some more time to really get into the nuances of the dynamics and the phrasing, and then we'll spend some time working on memorizing it. So for an older student, it's not unthinkable for them to have 1 or 2 pieces that carry over through the entire semester. But throughout the semester, they're working on smaller, bite-sized pieces. And if you are a parent who you've got maybe an older child and they're not a beginner, they're not a very young elementary student, so maybe you drop them off for lessons and then you pick them up, but you're not attending the lesson, you may not be aware of how repetitive some of their assignments are. Hopefully your teacher is very aware of the lack of motivation there would be in assigning the same piece over and over again. But if they're not, then you need to be a little more involved and maybe see exactly why are we doing this same piece over again. Ask your piano kid, how come you haven't made any progress on this? Why are you still working on the same music? Maybe there's something your piano teacher is wanting your child to master, and for whatever reason, your child's not getting that message. Is there anything in the assignment notes that will help your child understand, okay, yeah, you know to play the notes and rhythms, but see here, your teacher said they wanted more contrast between the louds and the softs. That's what you're missing. So even though you know how to play the song, your teacher's wanting to take it up to the next level and be a little more musical and a little more expressive with it. So you can help your piano kid understand. We're not just playing the same music to be playing the same music. We've got a bigger goal, a different objective that we're starting to work on. When I write the assignment notes in my students' planner, I try to be pretty specific about if I'm assigning the same piece of music again, I try to be pretty specific about why I'm doing that. And I'll have a conversation with the kid too. Why do you what would you like to accomplish with this music this week? And have them be a little bit more objective in, and also take a little more ownership in why we're working on this piece, and what our goal is, and how they can be more proactive on the days in between lessons. You did a good job this week playing just your right hand or just your left hand. This week I need you to work on putting both hands together. If you can't put both hands together for the whole piece, maybe you can put hands together just for the first line or the first 8 measures. Let's figure out some achievable goals so that we know we're making progress. If a student has a very long piece, then I might break it down into maybe just the first page or the first section, and I'll teach them that this music has 3 parts. And I want you to notice the first part and the last part are very similar to each other. So whatever you're practicing at the beginning is going to pay off for you when you get close to the end. You're going to need to give extra attention to the part in the middle because it's completely unique. It's not like anything else in the piece. And so if I have them work on just the first section, I'll use a Post-it note and I'll just write stop here or something and have them work on that smaller objective. And then when they meet that objective, hopefully within the next week or 2 weeks, then we can move our Post-it note to a different location in the music. Okay, we moved our stop sign. Keep working and polishing what you've already mastered, but then let's start working on some new material. So we have the same piece of music, but we're not working on the exact same thing within that music. If I have a student that comes to me after 2 or 3 weeks and they just have not learned the material, they haven't mastered this concept, or they haven't mastered this song, then I'll see if I can figure out a way to still learn the concept with a different piece of music. That's one of the things that I like about the Piano Adventures series, the method books that I use for almost all of my students, is that each book is divided into units, and most units have 2 or 3 pieces that teach the concept. And so if a student is really enjoying the music, then awesome. You've got 3 or 4 songs that you can learn, and they all cover this same idea. Sometimes I might assign the first piece of music in the unit after we've talked about the concept, and then I'll give them the choice. Now, these other 2 pieces are in the same unit, and they cover the same concept, so I bet if you wanted to, you could figure out how to play these other pieces. You and I worked on the first one together, but see what you can do with the other piece. We'll call that a bonus piece. So if you want to work on it, you can. If you don't get a chance to work on it, that's no problem because it was an extra piece. It was a bonus. And it's so fun to see students come in. Miss Davis, I worked on this piece that you assigned, and I worked on the other one. I could play both of them for you. Boy, oh boy, do I brag on them when they do that. I love it when students come into their lesson having worked on their assignment and then some. But if they come back the next week and they just really didn't make any connection, they didn't make any progress with their for sure piece, their assigned piece, then I'll kind of make a judgment call. Maybe we'll work on it some more together in the lesson, or maybe I'll say, let's go to the bonus piece. Why don't you try that one instead of the first one and see if they make a better connection with that. There's no reason, if a child is not connecting with a piece of music, there's no reason to just keep grounding and trying to force that connection. There's plenty of music in the world and plenty of music in the books that I choose to use to help them learn whatever this concept is and also play music that they enjoy. Sometimes it's not a matter of connecting with the music, it's a matter of just buckling down and doing the work. Kind of like Phil Connors in that Groundhog Day. He was not happy about that assignment that he had to do. And so when he first was recording the story and doing the report, you could tell that he was just phoning it in. And the other people on his team, the producer and the cameraman, they were all rolling their eyes. Come on, Phil, just do a good job. Just get this done. You have to do it, so just make the best of it. And originally, Phil wasn't feeling it. And maybe your piano kid isn't feeling it. And that could be because of several things. Maybe they don't feel like they can play it. And I would rather say that I don't like this music than admit that I don't know how to play this music. I would rather shuffle the responsibility onto something else. Maybe you're giving them too much, I hate to use the word freedom, you're giving them too much leeway about their practice schedule. Maybe, as the parent, you could look at your own involvement in their practice. And maybe you've been just kind of leaving it up to them, and the week goes by and they just haven't done it for one reason or another. And so it might be a good idea for you to look at your own schedule and evaluate how often are they really getting to the piano. And maybe you need to step in and intervene a little bit. Sometimes when my kids were little, I would tell them, okay, I need you to take out the garbage, or I need you to do whatever chore. And I'll leave it up to you as to when you do it. But if you don't do it, you're going to have to listen to me complain about it. So you can either get it over with, get it done, or you've got that hanging over your head. Plus, you're going to have to hear me complaining. You don't want to be the complainer. You don't want to have piano practice be a source of contention. But the reality is you're investing time and money to get them to lessons. They need to make sure that they're doing their part of the deal. They need to invest their time to learn the things that your teacher is trying to teach them. Sometimes it's helpful for children to have an external goal. If there's something else that they're working toward, then they can get to the piano to practice and they can do all of the details that their teacher is wanting them to notice in this piece of music. If they're working toward a festival, or they know that they're going to have their spring recital coming up in a few weeks, or they're working so that they can get another sticker on the memory chart, if there's some kind of external goal, then that might be the kind of thing that helps them dedicate the time and the attention to this particular piece of music that it deserves. Thinking about the Groundhog Day still, I'll share a video in the show notes for you where it's a YouTube channel called Lessons from the Screenplay. And he pulls out several different ways that Phil Connors tries to avoid being in the situation that he is in. He started out being very selfish and self-absorbed and not really considering anybody else's feelings or thoughts or anything else. And then once he was reliving this same day over and over, he went through different phases where he just kind of took advantage of the situation. And since he knew certain things were going to happen, he could manipulate them to his favor. There were other things that he did to try to get out of this reality that he was living. But ultimately, he was very interested in Rita, his producer, and she was the kind of person that would never be interested in Phil the way his original character was. She wasn't interested in someone who was going to be selfish and all about himself. She was a selfless person, and so to have a relationship with someone, she wanted the same type of person, someone else who was going to be selfless and think of others and not just only think of themselves. So ultimately, Phil decided that's the kind of person I want to be. I want to be the kind of man that Rita would be interested in. So he had this external motivation. He wanted to change himself. He wanted his character to mature and be the kind of person that Rita would be interested in. Maybe your piano kid needs to have some external thing, an external goal, a carrot that they're working toward, and that drives them to do the work that they need to do. You're not going to be able to memorize that song. You're not going to be able to add it to your song Sunday if you aren't working on it now. You've got to put in the work in order to get to the prize that you're wanting. In my studio, my lessons are 30 minutes each week. Some teachers teach 45-minute lessons. Some teachers teach an hour. And I've had people ask me from time to time, how Do you put everything into a 30-minute lesson? That there is just not enough time for us to do everything. And I think that's part of my secret, is that we don't do everything. Over the last few weeks, my students have been focusing on their theory homework. In the state of Texas, we have our theory test, and that happened this past weekend as I'm recording. And so we've been doing a lot of theory prep and making sure they're doing their workbook and they're understanding the concepts that will be covered on this written theory exam. So that means some of the other things that we might normally do, we haven't focused on in the lesson. Now that the theory test is over, we can change our focus towards something else. Not long from now, in the not too distant future, it's going to be time to start planning for the recital. And so I'll choose some bigger pieces for students to start studying, and we'll start chipping away at them a little bit at a time, maybe working on one section or one page. But while they're working on that, I might give them some smaller pieces. I might even have them go back and play some of their tag songs, some pieces that they have mastered in previous units, and pieces that they tell me, oh, I really enjoyed that one. That was my favorite one in the unit. So we'll put a Post-it, one of the plastic flags, a sticky note on there, and then I'll tell them, go back and play your tag songs. But this time, when you're playing your tag songs, see if you can really notice whatever the new concept is that we're working on. See if you can really notice the phrasing. Can you be kind of quiet and ease into the phrase quietly, gradually getting stronger? And anyway, whatever the concept is, apply that to their review pieces. And then when they come in for their next lesson, we might start with a tag song, but then finish the lesson really focusing on this new recital piece that they're starting to work on. Maybe the next week we'll start with their technical skills. I like to have them finish different skills by the spring recital, and some students earn awards based on mastery of all of the skills of a certain level. So we need to focus on those, and then we'll play your recital piece, and then, okay, let's finish with a memory piece. So we can rotate what we're doing at each lesson, rotate what the focus is while they're practicing at home, so that hopefully we don't find ourselves on some sort of hamster wheel where we're just doing the same thing over and over and over. So as far as takeaways from this episode, I would recommend, I plan to watch Groundhog Day sometime around February 2nd. I think it would be a fun movie for you and your family to watch also. And as you watch, notice the transformation of Phil and how his character started out one way, but he had a definite change toward the end of the movie. And then take a moment to evaluate your piano kid's assignment and take a look at the music that they're working on. Maybe your teacher is marking dates on there, and are they scratching out a date and writing a new date? And have we been sort of kind of in a rut with the music that they're working on? Maybe you can have a conversation with your piano kid. This might be a good conversation to have with your piano teacher. I see that they've been working on this piece since before Christmas. Is there something that I can do to help you and help my piano kid to master this piece and then move on? Help me understand what the goal is here. And then finally, I would encourage you to go to the show notes for this episode. You can find those at pianoparentpodcast.com/356. And in the show notes, I am including a couple of different YouTube videos. One that tells a little bit of the history of Groundhog Day, if you're interested in that. And the other is that Lessons from the Screenplay, where whoever owns that YouTube channel kind of digs into Groundhog Day and talks more about the transformation of Phil Connors. And then one other fun little tidbit, a running theme of the movie is that every morning when the alarm clock clicks over to 6 a.m., then his alarm goes off and it plays Sonny and Cher's song, I Got You, Babe. And that song, especially the chorus, the kind of back and forth with I Got You, Babe, only has a couple of different chords. And so I'll put a link if your piano kid might be interested in playing that. I'll put a link to a chord sheet that you might want to purchase for them. It's not mine. It would be nice if I had things like that to offer for sale, but it's a link to sheetmusicdirect.com where you can get that music in a variety of different formats. But I'll link that up in the show notes for you. And I hope that you and your piano kid enjoy Groundhog Day, but don't find yourself in a perpetual loop of doing the same thing over and over and over. Learn the lessons from Phil without having to go through 30 or 40 years of repetition. I appreciate you for listening today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging around all the way to the end. If you haven't done so already, this would be a great time for you to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast player is, hit subscribe so you will be the first to receive next week's episode. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, and you could just email me, Shelley at pianoparentpodcast.com.